Now, I would also encourage you to pay attention to federal contractor requirements. I'm guessing neither of you is a federal contractor. The federal government is the largest employer in the country, right? They just are. So when they may not be able, the president would like to raise the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour. He can't get that through Congress, and he can't do it through he can't do it with an executive order. That really would cause a constitutional crisis. And he knows he can't do it, and he's not going to try. What he can do is require anyone doing business with the largest employer and the largest landowner and the largest property manager and the largest customer in the country, the federal government. He can require those contractors to pay $10.10 an hour if they want a federal contract. Does that make sense? So now if you have put into place some of requirements on some of the largest employers in the country, because who's getting these federal contracts? It's big companies, right? That employ a lot of people. So now you can start to see a ripple effect through the economy where, if General Dynamics, if Boeing has to pay $10.10 an hour, now they're maybe starting to set the labor, the pay rate in the labor market, because they have to do this because they're a federal contractor. So now you can start it's really, really smart, honestly. If they want to change the way people are paid and employed in this country, doing it through federal contracting is, in the absence of the ability to do it through legislation, is really pretty smart. And they're not being shy about what they're doing. They also have, for federal contractors, you have to add gender identity and sexual orientation to protected classes, people that you can't retaliate against based on those issues. They also have to report a 3-year history of violations of the Fair Labor Standards Act, OSHA, Family Medical Leave Act, labor regulations, NLRB violations. They have to report a 3-year history, and then going forward, they have to prospectively file semi-annual reports of any violations that they've been found guilty of. That will be public information in a searchable database. Again, very good fodder for shaming campaigns and legal action, class actions, right? Big business these days. More federal contractor requirements. Arbitration and sexual harassment cases has been a big cost savings for a lot of businesses. They're not going to let you do that if you want a federal contract. There are some requirements for hiring the disabled and veterans. And you see there, this was proposed for federal contractors, that currently federal contractors and people with more than 100 employees have to file this EEO-1 report about salary information. Well, there's going to be another revision to that report that these companies have to file that is going to have information on compensation paid to employees broken out by race, sex, ethnicity, based on job categories. So this is a whole nother requirement of bigger companies and federal contractors to self-report for places for them to identify pay discrimination, intentional or not. You don't defend yourself when you're filing that report. It's just the numbers are what they are, and then you've got to defend yourself. And again, publicly available information could result in more shaming campaigns. To the new protected classes. No, it doesn't specify sexual, or it doesn't. I mean, excuse me, not sexual orientation. It doesn't. It doesn't include gender identity. I can't say sexual orientation. I don't know for sure. Have federal contracts or have 100 employees or more. It was originally just federal contractors, but since the last time we did this in January, they've actually put the proposal out, and it included non-federal contractors with more than 100. Oh yeah, it is. And it was kind of surprising that they went that far. But I think look, the president wants to change the way, change the relationship between employers and management in this country, and he is dedicated to it, and he has not shown that he's afraid to take bold steps. And you may disagree with him, but you can't disagree that he's taking bold action. There's also, this is less important to us, but I just bring it up because conceptually it's important. The Obama administration does not like the concept of outsourcing jobs. They have a lot of concern about this sort of sharing economy, and if I hire you on contract, or if I hire you as an independent contractor, I don't have to pay you benefits. And they have this impression that more and more businesses are using independent contracting as a means of staying below thresholds of number of full-time equivalents for the Affordable Care Act, and just in other situations. They're not good jobs. They want you to hire somebody and have them, provide them benefits, and be responsible for them. That's conceptually, that's where their head is at, as the economy is actually going in a different direction. So the way they're trying to do this is the National Labor Relations Board just did a finding against Brown Ferris International, which is a waste disposal company. Without getting into the vagaries of it, the upshot is that the finding indicates that BFI is responsible for a contractor's actions of theirs, just as if the people that were employed there were employees of BFI. This is actually a chilling effect on franchises more than we have to worry about it. So theoretically, under this ruling, McDonald's could be responsible for the actions of any employees at any one of their franchise locations. Just a really big change in the way that we're doing business. I don't think it impacts us as much, but I just think it's interesting to see where some of the activity is. And this is another big one here that if you're trading in a larger metropolitan area and there are set-asides for disadvantaged business entities, whether they be woman or minority owned, again, the program with the best of intentions, how can we level the playing field for historically disadvantaged businesses? We can do some set-asides and require that if you're going to get a contract for a large project, that a certain percentage of that business has to go to a disadvantaged business, right? It's not new. What is new is that in a lot of cases, I think your contractors have been dealing with this for years. Well, okay, I got to get a pass-through. And the pass-through doesn't really, they're providing labor, but they're not really providing labor. They're just kind of doing the paperwork and money's passing through them and they get their cut, right? That's really been hard for the Justice Department to prosecute, because how do you know who's who on a job site, who's doing the labor, and there's some ambiguity there, right? Just by the nature of the way projects are done. So what the Justice Department has done is they've actually started looking at suppliers, because it's easier for me as the Justice Department or as a prosecutor to show that you really don't have any assets. You don't have a warehouse, you don't have any trucks, you don't have any inventory. You're just a pass-through. I mean, because you need to have that stuff if you're actually a supplier, right? Whereas if you're a contractor, well, it's people. And this guy may be working for him and then them and then sometime and then... So there's ambiguity there. There's less ambiguity if you don't have a building or inventory. I can prosecute you much easier than that contractor. So more distributors are getting caught up in this because, even unwittingly, there may be a certification, a state certification or a local certification. Well, this is a certified woman-owned business, right? Well, maybe their certification, maybe their actual qualifications for that certification have changed over the years, but they're still certified. So I think I'm working with a certified woman-owned business as a partner on this job, and so I'm covered. But in reality, if the federal government comes in and audits that project and says, well, no, they're not really certified. They say they're certified, but they don't meet these. They're not performing what's the phrase, a commercially valuable service or something like that. Distributors are starting to get caught up in these things, in these fraudulent DBE practices. HD Supply Waterworks just got hit with $5 million in penalties. Siemens got hit with a huge judgment on one of these instances. And this is a case in bigger metropolitan area markets, I think, in a lot of cases, or state projects, where it's sort of having a little bit of a chilling effect, because if you're a distributor, you have to say, there just aren't that many of these guys out there. And if you're a minority-owned business that has your stuff together, before long, you're going to be doing so much business that you're no longer eligible, right? So the pool of these guys is shifting and changing, and I'm guessing in Detroit, it's got to be a nightmare.
Yeah, I was just trying to bring that up. There's a couple of what I'll call legitimate minority-owned businesses or women-owned or DBEs, and there are some very how do I put it, illegal or I don't know how to put it with that.
Somebody's willing to take that work, right? Somebody's willing to take that risk.
Distributors who have people on staff who have or who are legitimate minorities, but they own a business on the side, but they don't have an address, inventory, anything like that. And that is very much going on, and it has an effect on the marketplace.
Yeah.
I'd very much like the legitimate DBEs to, even though it's not me, to have that business, and some of these illegitimate people go away.
Yeah. And I don't think there's, obviously if there were an easy answer to this. We've looked for policy responses to this, and it's just politically toxic. You can't say anything about this, or you're against disadvantaged businesses. Well, nobody's going to touch that from a policy perspective, because sort of the political shorthand is too toxic. The reality is, as we continue to expand set-asides for fewer people that are eligible and really can do this, you're actually inviting more fraud. So it's a difficult issue. We've responded with a white paper, and we talked about it in the council meeting yesterday. It's just being released, that has some red flags, what to look out for, how to protect yourself in these projects. Ultimately, I think the people that are here are the ones who are maybe typically more responsible about this anyway. So it's like, we can put this out to you guys, but you get it. It's the guys who aren't here that probably need to read the damn things. I don't know how to do that, but that's what we've tried to do. We've got some articles in the magazine and done this report, and we'll continue to look for policy responses. But it's going to be a tough issue. I think what some of our guys have said is that we just need to raise the profile of the problem and have a conversation about it instead of just sort of whistling past the graveyard. Another good idea I heard from a distributor the other day was, look, you got to get the manufacturers to be aware of this, because I think they're kind of blissfully ignorant. I mean, it's sort of, yeah, we know this may be going on, but I don't know what we have to do about it. At the end of the day, if they get dragged into the penalties, they're going to want to know about it. And maybe there's some help they can do on the front end of due diligence, saying, look, we've got to have certainty that this is a supplier that's not going to get us in trouble, right? Otherwise, I don't want the work. Well, they're going to want the work, but under what circumstances? If they have more ownership up front, they've got a bigger, in a lot of cases, they've got a bigger hammer with that client.
Wouldn't the real answer be just to enforce the current policies we have in place and audit some of these companies? I mean, even the legitimate ones?
Yeah, it certainly wouldn't hurt. I guess trying to think from a macro level, how do we avoid getting in, it's just at least our guys getting into that position through ignorance is one thing. But I think the inconsistency from market to market is also an issue there, because these aren't federal rules, right? There a lot of the states have their own rules, but then a lot of large municipalities. Detroit's probably got a different certification there, and then at that point, again, may not be politically correct to say, but in a lot of major metropolitan areas, they don't want it enforced because there are political considerations. Where if I'm an alderman and one of my constituents is getting all that work, I don't really care. So I think there's, and they can raise that argument that, well, you're just going after disadvantaged businesses. You don't like minority-owned companies. So now you're putting yourself in that position of asking for more of that enforcement. It's not politically easy, but yeah, that's the answer. But I think there are mitigating circumstances in a lot of cases where people don't necessarily want it enforced.